Oh, well, hello. So, for this month, Focus on Local History, we're going to be talking about Dundas. Uh, Technically, Dundas is not part of Kaukauna. It's in Calumet County, so maybe Chilton would claim it. But I consider it part of Kaukauna history because kids who grew up in Dundas went to Kaukauna schools, so I figured that's fair game. According to a newspaper article published in 1999, Dundas was once a quote-unquote thriving city. I'm not sure how they defined thriving. I suppose that's very subjective, but it was definitely much busier than it is today. Anyone who's familiar with Dundas today knows that it's pretty much just two bars. That's really all Dundas is known for, but it does have a long history. The very first post office was established in Dundas in 1846. Before Wisconsin was a state, Dundas had a post office. And the reason for that is the military road went through Dundas, and the road is still named Military Road today, so you know where the military road roughly ran. So it was a logical stopping point for mail delivery because that was one of the main roads through town before everything was built up around here. We don't even know what it's named after, why it's named Dundas. There's a couple different theories, but nobody knows for sure. The railroad came through in 1872. It was the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. They built a little depot there. They had passenger trains. They had freight trains that came through. So you could actually go to the train station and ride to and from Dundas. So this is a real thing. For a while they were searching for coal. They were digging and looking for coal. They did find a little bit, but not enough to actually make anything of it. So it could have been a takeoff point, didn't happen. Mostly what it was known for, and it's still probably known for, besides the bars, is being a farming community. And early on, around 1900s up to 1910s, they had what was called the Farmers Institute. And the Farmers Institute was sort of a cross between a county fair and a university. Once a year, they would have this multi-day event where people would be getting prizes for their crops or their animals, like a county fair. But then they would also have people from the UW come in and teach them new methods. And they would share methods with each other. So people from throughout the state would come to Dundas and they would say, hey, have you figured out ways to grow better corn or whatever? And they would share information with each other, and then the professors would come in and talk about things that the farmers may not necessarily know. One year, the big topic was bovine tuberculosis, which understandably the university was probably more knowledgeable about than the farmers were. The farmers would probably be like, what is going on with our cows? Because they're not, they know their cows, but they're not medical professionals. The centerpiece of pretty much any city town is a church. That's a given anywhere. And in Dundas, it's St. John Lutheran. St. John's was established in 1868. So I'm not sure what the math on that is, but that's is that 152 years? Is that right? Long time. It's been there a long, long time. For the first 10 years, they had rotating pastors. They would have people come in from Reedsville or Brilliant or surrounding areas and give their sermons each week. But after the first 10 years, they had built up enough where they got their own pastor, and they've had their own pastor ever since. They do still exist today. It's still out there in the Dundas area. Some people might say it's in Woodville, but the boundaries are sort of fluid. They consider themselves being in Dundas. One of the most important people in Dundas history is Joseph Wolfinger. And so Joe Wolfinger, he started out as a blacksmith. He moved to Dundas in 1877. He started out as an inventor. He invented all kinds of canning machinery. He invented different kinds of boxes for storing things, which Today doesn't sound that exciting, but it was crucially important to know how to build wooden boxes to keep things for longer. They didn't have refrigeration and things like that, so you really wanted a good storage system. And that is what he focused on, was on his box building. He started what was called a woodenware factory, and they would make pails, and they would make cheese boxes, and they would make other things out of wood. The first one that he built burned down in 1898. So he rebuilt, and when he rebuilt, he decided, well, first time around I was the only owner and I had to pay for all the losses. That wasn't so great. So he started a company, so the company would take the losses in the future instead of him personally. So he brought in his friend from Kaukauna, a man named Frank Becker, who was the president of the First National Bank. Probably a wise idea. Being the president of First National Bank, I'm sure he was an excellent investor. So they ran the company for a while, and guess what? It burns down again. They rebuild it one more time. It lasts about 2 years, and it burns down again. So apparently, if you manufacture wooden products, sooner or later your factory is going to burn down. It happened 3 times within an 8-year period, and then finally he was like, okay, I'm done. But he had all his patents, so he did pretty well with that. You can look him up, or maybe I'll post something about the patents that he had. He even patented some wooden shoes. I mean, he was just making all kinds of things. And there's newspaper articles. When he was 84 years old, they actually made a series of articles on different inventions he made. They were like, he's 84 and he's still inventing. So he was a little bit of a legend in his day, I suppose. Okay. His family is still in the Dundas area. His son operated an automobile garage out there, so he was a car mechanic. And then Wolfinger Water and Backhoe Service was started in 1967. And today it is still there. It is run by Brad Wolfinger, who is 3rd or 4th generation at this point, so they are still there. The other and final thing with Dundas that we will talk about is the pea factory. They would have tons and tons of peas, and I don't know if there's still peas out there, but they had over 800 acres of peas. So the canning factory was kind of a big deal. It would employ a few hundred people who would go out and pick the peas, and then they'd have to can the peas, and they'd ship them out throughout the country, or at least the Midwest. And it was hugely successful. It got really well known during World War II because they were considered essential, because you had to keep feeding people, and the workforce was deplenished because all the young men had gone off to war. So they were bringing in high school girls to do the job that the grown men had been doing. For a while they were bringing in a bunch of Jamaican men. I don't know where they found all these Jamaican men, but a bunch of Jamaican men were coming in and working there. And then, sort of notoriously, by the end of World War II, they brought in German POWs to work there. And because there were a lot of POW camps in Wisconsin, specifically because a lot of people in Wisconsin could speak German, or at least could at the time. So it made sense to put the German POW camps in a place where the local community could actually understand what the prisoners were saying. And they put them to work in the pea factory. Now, the problem with that is you have all these young American men off to war. You have high school girls in this factory. You have young German men, 18, 19, 20 years old, in this factory. And there's more than a few stories out there about the German soldiers and the American girls fraternizing. There's at least one baby born that we know of. So I don't think that was something they had foreseen, but an interesting consequence of bringing in German prisoners to work with high school girls, I guess. The canning factory, I'm not sure exactly how long it lasted. Our newspaper index kind of fades out in the 1950s, and as near as I can tell, it didn't go much longer than that, maybe early 1960s. Somebody can correct me on that, I could be very wrong. And the railroad left Dundas in 1970, so no more giant factory, no woodenware, no railroad, and from 1970 on, it kind of became known for what it's known for today, just being this very isolated community with 2 bars. But for a while there, it did employ a good number of people. It was important in national defense and sort of a regional center for learning about farming and farming education. So Dundas did have its important place in Wisconsin history. And that's our discussion for this month. Please, if you have any photos or stories to share, let me know. I would love to add them to the records here. Thank you very much.
The discussions of the farming, the gathering of farmers to discuss, was that any kind of precursor to Farm Progress Days, or was it its own separate thing? Is it related in any way?
Okay, so the Farmers Institutes were, this gets kind of technical. There were what was called land grant universities, and they were universities that were started through federal land grants, and the UW is one of those. And as part of that, there was an agreement that they would provide education through the university to the farming communities. So they did that for a while, and that's where these Farmers Institutes would pop up. Wisconsin wasn't the only place that had them. And then around 1914, they passed a federal law that sort of superseded that, and they no longer had these professors going out into the community. They created extensions, UW extensions, where they would teach farmers about agriculture and farming, growing flowers. I mean, any sort of thing that's horticulture, agriculture related. So they would have them actual set buildings you could go to, and as part of that, they sort of spread the idea that we should have more 4-H clubs, things like that. Your question specifically, I'm not sure, but it did sort of evolve over the years. So some of the things that we have today are probably an extension of those ideas. But yeah, like 4-H was a big thing that came out of that. Oh, okay. I guess that's it. Well, thank you.